We come to it at last. The great battle of our time.
What's there to say about this movie? This is a really hard one to talk about because, quite frankly, it's just so massive, especially considering it's the third part of a celebrated trilogy. That's not to say the movies didn't have its hype. Even before Fellowship of the Ring hit theaters in 2001, the film trilogy was highly anticipated due to an already mega successful trilogy of books. In the 70s, it was all about Frodo. I remember seeing snippets of the animated Return of the King as a kid and thinking, what kind of acid trip am I on? It's so strange how two films based on the same book can come out so vastly different.
Frodo of the Nine Fingers and the Ring of Doom.
When Fellowship of the Ring came out, I admit I was pretty disappointed given how much coverage this film was getting. I was in film school at the time, and everyone was talking about it. I mean, this was a huge undertaking for Peter Jackson, who, prior to that, directed schlocky horror gems like Bad Taste and Dead Alive, probably the bloodiest movie I've ever seen. But regardless of how much hype this film was getting, I hadn't yet read the books, and I was more akin to simpler fantasies like Harry Potter and the Dragonlance Chronicles, both of which were far better written, in my opinion. Lord of the Rings, from what I saw in that first film, was a more practical type of fantasy. Yeah, there were different fantasy races like dwarves and elves, and even a little bit of magic. But when it came down to it, it just didn't seem to have the panache of a Quidditch match or a battle with a hideous dragon. Not to mention that first movie takes forever to get off its feet, and some of the scenes are just flat out weird for the sake of being weird. But my opinion didn't count. People loved that first movie. And you know what? After reading The Hobbit, then The Fellowship of the Ring, I came to appreciate it more. Don't get me wrong, the Rings books are pretty difficult reads. For anyone who's read the books, people pretty much tend to agree with me. They're like reading Frodo's extended journal. They go into detail about everything. You thought they walked a lot in the movies? Just read the books. They walk everywhere. Now, all joking aside, there has been some debate about which is better, the films or the books. What a lot of people don't realize about books and movies, aside from the fact that a movie has a much tighter time frame, is that not everything lends itself to film. With the book, there are no rules. You have all the time in the world to describe someone's past, where they've been, their thoughts on life, so on and so on. The only limitation is how many pieces of paper you have at your disposal. But with the film, you have to take any side story, any backstory, any extended prologue, and anything not having any immediate relevance to the story has to get chucked out the window. This oftentimes comes at the expense of annoying hardcore fans of an established franchise, and it's unavoidable. From comic book adaptations to novels, something always gets left out, especially if it isn't a major plot thread. There were tons of people who were angry that Tom Bombadil didn't make it into the Fellowship of the Ring film. He has such a small role in the trilogy, making, I think, just one brief appearance, and yet people were frustrated that he wasn't in the movie. But what makes the film so much better, aside from added character development and faster pace, is that even if a character got less screen time or was omitted altogether, Jackson found some way to nod to them somewhere else down the road. He might give another character someone's piece of dialogue, someone who only appeared in the books, just to show people that their beloved side characters didn't get the axe in vain. And that's more than what can be said for a lot of other movies that simply slash scenes left and right and act as if they flat out don't exist. At the same time, this series has so many technical achievements, it's amazing. Anything you could possibly want to learn about special effects happens in one of these films. Using camera tricks or duplicate set pieces to get the right scope for the hobbits, even using a simple camera trick to make it look like someone's on fire, are all things a lot of major studios overlook, using CGI for everything. And I remember the first time I saw Gollum, the first digital character in which the CGI didn't draw attention to itself. Andy Serkis's performance of Smeagol was so convincing that you actually believed he was an actual actor, and not just a digital wireframe painted over with some nifty computer tools. It went to show that a believable character is all about the performance, and not how many frames you can incorporate into the finished product. Now, in all honesty, it is easier to do a review on the whole trilogy, but I'm here mainly to cover the third film. You know, the one that actually won the Academy Award for Best Picture. It's amazing that this film surpassed the prior two films so much. And yet, the Battle of Pelennor Fields makes the Battle of Helm's Deep look like a trip to the petting zoo. The scope of this movie is just larger than life. There's so much going on at one time. It almost doesn't seem like you're watching a movie. It kind of feels like you're on a 3-hour roller coaster ride. And it isn't just this massive action flick with tons of mindless effects either. Save that kind of movie for Michael Bay. There are so many scenes that resonate with the audience. Gandalf taking Pippin to the city of Gollum conspiring against Sam to win Frodo's trust, Aragorn going off on his own to fight the skeleton army, Legolas and Gimli's playful competitiveness as they fight on the battlefield,
That still only counts as one!
Sam's rescue of Frodo and carrying him up to Mount Doom, and yes, even the 12 endings. It works as a great epic fantasy film of its own merit. You see this film and it almost makes you forget that the first two movies exist. But at the same time, when it ends, it does such an amazing job of tying up the whole trilogy. When it's all said and done and you tally up what you experience watching all three films, it feels like you've been on an adventure. The visuals, just epic. The battle scenes just steal the show. It's chaos with a plan. There are so many movies with over-the-top action scenes, but usually they drag on for far too long, and the goal is usually to see how many explosions you can generate in a given time frame. This movie almost feels like it has a rhythm, as if the battle scenes were all carefully choreographed, with each shot feeling like it belongs to the whole. It doesn't seem gratuitous, it feels necessary. And there are so many phases to this large-scale battle. It genuinely feels like it truly is the last battle for Middle-earth. Then there's the unlimited number of endings, which everyone complains about. I loved how it ended. I wouldn't have it any other way. This wasn't just one movie after all, it was the conclusion to 3 films. As such, it owed us that epic closure. Sure, I remember when the movie came toward the end, the screen seemed to fade to black an awful lot, and people kept rising from their seats every time it did so. But honestly, how could you end this series on a bitter note like that? Each one of those scenes could have ended the movie. For a dreadful moment I thought we were going to go out with Frodo and Sam stranded on that rock in the middle of Mount Doom. This entire sequence is probably the most emotional scene in any movie that I can think of. If you watch this scene without shedding a tear, you must be one heartless bastard. It gives everyone their dues. Everyone gets their final goodbye, and it makes the film's final moments resonate that much more. This movie just can't be done any justice. No review is going to be able to sum up this film. It's something you really need to experience. Of course, that doesn't exclude you from watching the first 2 movies. It's a prerequisite before you saddle on up for the main event. And I know, there are people who just don't like fantasy as a genre, and I get it. But if you're open-minded, and you want to be entertained and mesmerized, and you have 10 hours to spare, you cannot pass these films up. They are just epic. Fellowship was amusing, Two Towers was exceptional, but Return of the King just sets the bar for what makes great storytelling. Every scene could be played by itself, and it would make you want to sit and experience the whole film in all its cinematic glory. Do yourself a favor, and if you haven't done so yet, get this movie. Buy it. It'll be the best $20 you'll ever spend. With that being said, it's a perfect contender for the number 9 spot on my list of all-time favorite films. And in case you're wondering, I know I already talked about this one, but Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, number 8.
My friends,